Why do I read?
I live in two worlds. One is a world of books.
For me, it's books, books, books.
The mind needs books like a sword needs a whetstone.
I guess people like to read about the things that they want most and experience least.
Books feed me.
Once upon a time.
I read it in a book once.
Is this a kissing book?
I don't care. I'm not ashamed of my book.
It's not right for a woman to read. Soon she starts getting ideas and thinking.
I checked that weeks ago, forbidden like reading.
You have never interested me more.
I have many leather-bound books, and my apartment smells of rich mahogany.
Now, when you read, don't just consider what the author thinks. Consider what you think.
I love that book.
I hated that book.
How can you read this? There's no pictures.
Don't read this book.
Those books are good. This might be the best book I've ever read.
I'm gonna go read.
Go ahead, read.
Why do I read?
I read because this world is modeled after me.
This is Halloween. This is Halloween. Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Bookmates.
Blast off.
Blast off. Hello. Hello. Hi. It's weird seeing you now.
Why?
Well, I don't know, because you were just here. So you guys, Lita was just here visiting me in person on a little vacay. So
we were gonna record, but like we were too into our own shit. Sorry.
Yeah, we it's so rare that we get to spend time with each other actually in person because we live so far away. I'm in Utah and Lita's in Indiana, so it's kind of rare for us to be in the same room. And we're like, we should record a little bit while we're
talking
in person.
Like maybe once a year, but there
lucky.
have been years where there's been lots of time.
Yeah, especially after COVID, it was a few years of time that we didn't see each other in person. Sometimes, like, I was thinking about your whole trip afterwards, and I'm like, sometimes I feel like it was a dream that I had because I'm just so used to seeing you on the computer.
Saying that when I was there,
right? I don't feel like I've laughed that hard, probably since the last time we were together in person.
We are hilarious.
Like, legitimately, by the time she went home, my abs hurt from laughing so much.
Yeah, I think, like, that last day I was there, we were just so exhausted from having a good party time that we just sat and read together, which is the dorkiest thing, but we had, like, a little reading party.
It was so great and so appropriate for us.
And also, I'm drinking wine tonight. Are you drinking wine?
Yes, I am. What
wine are you drinking?
I got a Pinot Noir.
Oh, did you? I got a Pinot Grigio. Here's my bottle.
That's the same one that I got you while you were here.
Yeah, the one you want to turn into a toiletry item.
Yes.
I was like,
it's a beautiful bottle.
I'm not sure what country it's from. It looks French. Free-Zenit, maybe. Don't.
I'm sure that's exactly how it's pronounced.
Free-Zenit.
No, this one was on sale, so that's why I picked this one. You know what I should do? There's actually one glass worth left in it. I should get myself some, and then we'll be drinking the same wine.
Oh, twinsies.
You're right, it does look French.
It's very French.
Have you had some already? Have you had some already?
No. I'm just feeling cheeky by nature.
You cheeky little blighter.
I'm so cheeky.
Wow, we're already.
I should laugh like that all night, like the French laugh every time.
Because that's not gonna get old immediately.
I don't want to upset our only listener from France because we
love
one.
You,
and we love you, France. We love you, France person.
Also,
France
just
person.
Shout out to every single country. You know, we have 28 countries now on our list, which is insane to me. Thank you all for listening.
That is so crazy to me. I just have this vision of like some random person listening to our dumb voices, like walking by the Tower of Pisa.
Right? It's so weird. It's so weird, and I never.
So surreal. We don't have any from South America, though.
Yeah, that's our white whale now. So come on, South America. And you guys, I feel like everybody should acknowledge the restraint that we both had to not discuss this book even while we were together for a week in person. We kept it pure for this moment.
And actually, we're going to talk about even more than just the book, because we also, after we read it, watched the movie separately.
Yes. So
we did watch it.
Yes.
So we're going to have a little book-movie discussion. Book versus movie.
Which is fun. We've never had a chance to do that before.
Yeah.
Cheers to our fancy French wine. Corks are for quitters. I love that.
Yeah, that's what my wine glass says. Corks are for quitters. We like our drinks.
We ain't no cock-a-doodle quitters.
Okay. All right. Welcome.
Bookmates.
To our book movie discussion of Misery by Stephen King. It's actually called Misery, a novel. A lot of times when I went to search for it, it would come up Misery, a novel.
What a novel idea.
By the master of horror, Stephen King.
And in case you didn't catch it on our last episode, this is my first ever Stephen King read. So I was really excited.
Yes. It's October.
It's October and it's spooky time, and I'm like, what better chance? Let's get into Stephen King. So it's my first Stephen King book under my belt.
Welcome. This is a rough one for the first.
Is it?
This is the rough one. It's pretty graphic because some of his work isn't like this, but this one's pretty intense. So before we get into all of that, spoiler alerts.
Spoiler alert.
We're going to be talking about all the things. Anything triggering. Anything graphic, anything
concerning.
Violence, any cussing. Yes, we're going to dive into all of it.
We will be discussing every single plot point of the book. Nothing is off limits, so if you haven't read it and you want to read it, then hit pause, go listen to it, or read it, and then come back and listen to us. Or if you're too scaredy cat, or it's just a little bit too much for you, then you can just listen to us talk about it, and then you'll have context for when people ask you about it, or you're at a party and they're discussing a book and you say, "This book, pray tell, I know all about it," even though you haven't read it.
Yes, and also, I would not be surprised if there is not a decent amount of people who wouldn't want to read this book, because it is very graphically violent and very chilling, and some people just don't enjoy the genre of horror. And
that's okay, and totally understandable.
Reading horror, yeah, but still want to hear about what Misery is about, this is a great venue for you. Also, this episode will be on YouTube if you would like visuals, if you like to be visually stimulated. We have a YouTube with visual stimulation.
All of our episodes have visual versions over there for fun, extra things like visuals and what have you. Or if we were discussing parts of the movie, we might throw a movie clip or something up there, which we probably will do even more so in this episode, since we're also going to be discussing the movie. But you've read this book already, so how did it compare to your memory of it?
I read this book the first time when I was 17, and I'm now 36. Am I 36?
Yeah.
How old am I?
Well, I'm 37,
okay,
so you'd be 36.
And I think I actually enjoyed it more, just because I didn't really have the maturity level I have now. And I think there was a lot that was probably lost on me, just like the nuances in the writing. So I really thoroughly enjoyed this book. I love this book. What did you think? Did you like it?
I liked it. I will admit that I was slightly underwhelmed. Just, because I always try to not have expectations going into any book. But it's Stephen King. Like, he's legendary. And you've talked up this book, and so many people have talked up this book, and it's Stephen King, and it's one of his most, famous and popular novels ever. So I feel like I did have high expectations, and I liked it. It was very different from what I thought it was going to be, though, I will say. Like, not necessarily in a bad way, just
Oh, really?
I was
Really?
yeah, I was actually preparing myself for it to be but based on the things that you said, I was expecting it to be much more graphic than it actually was. I was kind of like, oh, that was it? Like, where was the
Really?
graphic parts? I guess I'm too desensitized.
Are you a serial killer?
No, but I've
Are
seen
you
every
all right?
season of American Horror Story, and so I think I was just like expecting it to be on par with some of that. Well, but
wow, I
just
think we're
based
gonna
on
disagree. This is the first time.
well, like I said, I didn't hate it. I liked it, but I wasn't blown away by it. I will say that.
Really? Okay. Well, let's get into it. Let's talk about it. We'll do a little synopsis here. So, Misery is a psychological horror thriller by Stephen King. The novel's narrative is based on the relationship of two main characters, a romance novelist named Paul Sheldon and his deranged self-proclaimed #1 fan, Annie Wilkes. When Paul is seriously injured following a car accident, a former nurse, Annie Wilkes, brings him into her home where Paul receives treatment and doses of pain medication, but soon after arriving, Paul realizes that he is a prisoner that is in for a horrifying fight for survival. Misery was also adapted into an Academy Award-winning film from 1990, directed by Rob Reiner, and into a theatrical production starring Laurie Metcalf and Bruce Willis in 2015. There is also the little fact that Kathy Bates won her Best Actress Oscar for the role of Annie Wilkes.
She did.
At the 63rd Annual Academy Awards, which is pretty cool. I love
Kathy Bates is perfection.
Love some Kathy Bates.
She can do no wrong. She's literally amazing in every single thing she's in.
And of course, Paul Sheldon in that film is played by James Caan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the casting for that was spot on.
Oh, it's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like James, and I did have the benefit of knowing that, because I have seen the movie in the past, but it had been definitely at least over 15 years since I've seen the movie. So it did feel like watching it again for the first time.
I really did forget what happened in the movie because I knew that some things were different, and I was like, oh, how's this gonna, because I haven't seen it in so long, and it holds up so well.
It was a good movie, and I think my mom too, because I was telling her how it kind of was and like the plot and stuff, and she was nervous also to watch the movie, and I told her, if you need to stop it at any time, that's okay, no shame. And she was like, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be.
What edition do you have of the book?
This one.
Oh, okay.
It's
that's the newer one.
The newest one, yeah.
Yes.
It has like
so
the blue
it's just like a
cover with the red.
I have this like old hardcover one, but the spine is like.
Ooh, I like the spine.
It's really cute. It looks like a bloody typewriter.
I like yours better than mine.
It's like a metallic, but I got mine on eBay. It's an older edition. There's a lot of editions of this book. I was on Goodreads, and there's
so many.
There's like almost 400 editions of this book.
Seriously, it's crazy. And different covers and everything.
Oh, one thing I did want to mention that I figured out pretty quickly. My dad actually brought this up to me. The audiobook version of Misery, there's this part at the beginning of the book when Stephen King is describing the crash and Paul's experiences with the crash, and it's fading in and out of like what's happening currently with Annie and the crash, and in that way it's kind of doing some setup for the book so you know what happened.
Yes.
In the audiobook version, it is very choppy and awkward. It doesn't really flow very well the way that the company like set up the audio. And it's very confusing. And actually, my dad thought that there was something wrong with the audiobook, that there was a glitch, and he stopped listening to it. And I felt the same way when I was listening, so I pulled out my actual physical copy. And in the book, parts of it are in italics. But there's like this weird music, and it's very, so just keep that in mind if you're going to be listening to the audiobook, that there's just a little bit of choppiness at the beginning that can be a bit confusing.
I agree. And that's, it's interesting that you say that, because I did tandem read this with the audiobook, but that part I actually read first. So I actually didn't listen to that part until later, because I kind of was curious to go back and listen to, because I actually my first note that I had of the whole book was that I liked the way that he went, the way that he wrote that scene, like in the way that he went back and forth between his memories of the crash and then her describing the crash to him. Like it's very cinematic feeling, you can just like kind of picture it in your brain, or at least I could. And I really liked that setup, but I can totally see, like, if you don't have the book in front of you, to kind of see that back and forth switching with the fonts and all that stuff, it'd be very confusing. And there's one thing I was gonna mention. I wasn't gonna mention it till later, but since we're kind of talking audiobook and stuff now, there was a part towards the middle where at this point, at this particular part, I was listening to it, and it's the part where Paul finds her serial killer scrapbook of all the terrible things that she's done. And in the book, it's kind of written in italics because she writes little notes under each incident. This is actually one of my quotes for later, but Paul looked up. He was totally still, but a pulse beat rapidly in his throat. His bowels felt loose and hot. Okay, Sarah J. But in the audiobook, the narrator's using her Annie voice for those parts. So like when that happened, I thought that she had walked in on him and found him, and I was like, oh no. And then I was like, oh, never mind. And then I opened the book and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that scene was very suspenseful, yes. I felt like.
Yeah, and I liked the way that it took its time there with, like, laying out all the different crimes throughout the years.
Annie does a lot. I wrote a list of all of the people in the book, the scrapbook, full of newspaper clippings of the people that she has killed or caused to die. And reveals her to be like basically a serial killer.
Right. I mean, her body count's at least 30.
Oh yeah. And here's the list that I wrote. An entire neighboring family, her father, her roommates, and while she worked as a nurse, many elderly or critically injured patients, and unnumbered. He said it just started to blur after a while. 11 infants. While she worked in the nursery department at a hospital. And the last bit of the infants that she killed resulted in her, like, getting arrested and having a trial, which she was acquitted. And then, obviously, the hiker. She also kills a hiker later on. Did she kill her ex-husband?
No, he escaped her because they got divorced.
She didn't kill her ex-husband.
Yeah. He escaped.
Yes.
And he cited, like, severe mental abuse and physical abuse. I really wanted more of the backstory between Annie and her husband. Like, how did Annie trick someone into falling in love with her? Like, did she actually love him? Was it a game? I feel like that was one thing that frustrated me a little bit, was that I feel like I just had so many Annie questions.
There are people that are crazy, violent. There are people with addictions who can hold it together long enough for there to be like this quick windswept romance with someone where they tie the knot, and it just is a matter of time before their real personality, not that glow of I'm in love.
No, for sure. I'm just curious on, like, if she
so, and I mean, at this time she's obviously, like, competent enough to work at hospitals and do a lot of, like, really responsible things. Like, she is a functioning member of society, even though she has these problems. They just get worse with time and age. So at this time, she's younger, she's beautiful, probably. She knows how to talk to people and be normal to some degree. And it's just that you can't hold that up forever, though.
I meant more like, I want to know where her head was at. Like, did she actually love him?
Obviously.
Was she... Well, not obviously, because she could have just been using him as a cover. Because a lot of serial killers do that. They, like, you know, set up their lives to look a certain way. So it's like, was it calculated on her end? Did she actually love him or care about him?
So I think that Annie gets obsessed with things. She's an obsessive person, right? So she gets obsessed with Paul's writing. She gets obsessed with killing. She gets obsessed with whatever is the focal point of her hyperfixation. And at that time, it was probably that guy.
Maybe. I wish we knew.
It's just that, and, well, I mean, I think some of that does come out later in the book when Paul is asking her to dinner with wine and all these things, and he's trying to kind of subtly, very, very subtly manipulate her in a romantic kind of a fashion. And you can see, like, how excited she is, feel like she's possibly falling in love with someone again. You know, she gets all dressed up. Oh, I know that you wouldn't pick someone like me. I'm not a fool. Oh, now she's like older. She's not attractive anymore by Paul's standards, at least. He knows that she's this dark person, but I'm sure that there were times where she wanted to hide that part of herself.
Right.
When she was younger, but now it's like, what? There's no use in hiding. Everybody knows. And I'm old and unattractive and I live alone, and my best friend's a fucking pig.
Misery the pig.
And I liked those little bits that Stephen King put in there about the author, Paul, having the research on psychology.
Yeah, that was cool.
He like brings out like little aspects of the things that she's doing within his psychology research that he's done for past books. About how people who are deranged act and how they create like a false sense of reality around themselves.
Yeah.
On page 75, an observation of Annie's psychosis through Paul Sheldon's eyes. Because of his researches for Misery, he had rather more than a layman's understanding of neurosis and psychosis, and he knew that although a borderline psychotic might have alternating periods of deep depression and almost aggressive cheerfulness and hilarity, the puffed and infected ego underlay all. Positive that all eyes were upon him or her. Positive that he or she was starring in a great drama. So, like, there's this undertone of, I'm putting on a performance, you know, and I think that would probably connect a little bit with how she was able to not necessarily fool her husband, but just cover up her behavior for a short period of time. But you can never keep that up forever. And obviously she wasn't able to if he divorced her, citing severe mental abuse. I thought that was an interesting way to kind of drop that information without making it so obvious.
I was going to say his, especially early on in the book, the way that he writes the descriptions of Paul's pain is so visceral. And like, it really makes you feel how, like, what an impossible situation that he's in. And not only is he limited by just the fact that like Annie's there and she's crazy and she's keeping him locked up, but even if he wanted to do something physical, like he's like physically incapable of doing literally anything.
I actually have a reference quote for that because the descriptions of pain are so vivid.
They are. Yeah. Huge.
And it's something that you just can't get from the movie.
Oh, I agree.
Just the way that he just,
that's one of my notes for that.
Think about your legs. Okay, guys, like your legs shattered in a car accident, completely fucking shattered. Like all the bones all throughout, your legs are disfigured. And someone carries you into their house and keeps you there. In like a makeshift, and puts your legs in these makeshift braces, but they're I mean, they're not really healing properly either.
Right, they're just...
Because it's just sitting in a brace and you're there for a long time and they're just giving you pain medication, but your legs are still, like, unusable and messed up and completely shattered.
Well, and
just not broken, just like you fell off of a 10-story building onto your legs.
Well, because, like, the whole car, like, fell on top of him. And I like just the feeling of isolation and desperation, but also him having to like know that he's got to play the long game because there's nothing he can do. Like he also is dependent on her for food, water, you know.
Well, not just that, but like just think about the amount of pain you would be in.
Like it's insane.
Like, I mean, how do you describe that? In this reference quote I have, the shuddering would not stop. The pain was like the end of the world. He thought, there comes a point when the very discussion of pain becomes redundant. No one knows there is pain the size of this in the world. No one. It is like being possessed by demons.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was really impressed with all of his vivid descriptions of that. Like it just really put you in that headspace of...
Well, also I could see how that could get boring after a while, like the repetitiveness about just talking about how much pain you're in.
Yeah, I do feel like there were some parts, especially in the middle, where it lulled and did get a little bit redundant for me at times. And I'm curious what you thought about this. I personally felt the misery chapters were so boring. I'm like, why do I have to...
No, I didn't feel that way.
I did. I was like, I fell asleep twice while reading some of those sections. I'm like, oh my god, this is so boring.
They're talking so much about these romance novels that sound so historical, but also a little bit twisted. So I was like chomping at the bit to just get any little bit of it.
Well, you know, it's funny because like the first time, like the first chapters or whatever, I was like, oh, that's cool. I like that. But then I think it was like the second or third one, I was like, okay, now it's getting boring. And they lasted a long time. And I feel like there was a lot of times where I was just like, okay, get back to Paul and Annie. Get back to Paul and Annie. Also, I feel like the Misery book itself like went from like had like 3 different plot lines going. Like it was kind of like historical romance, like old timey, and then it had all these like weird magical futuristic elements. I'm like, what even is this book?
Yeah.
Like, what is this book?
Well, that's what I mean. Like I was like, man, this sounds weird and fascinating. And also I love romance, like any kind of romance novels. I will give it a go as long as it's not contemporary or about cowboys.
Same.
I will try it out.
Yeah, hard pass on the cowboy stuff for me too.
Yeah, I don't know. There's just cowboy stuff isn't for me.
Oh, me too. Maybe it was all my years in North Carolina.
The contemporary cowboy stuff. The contemporary ones. Like, if it was, like, back then, and there's some interesting stuff going on, maybe, okay.
Yeah, but then that lumps into more, like, historical romance versus, like, cowboy. Like, I'm on a Montana dude ranch. I don't know, like...
What did you think of the character of Paul? Did you like Paul?
Okay, this is actually my biggest thing of the book. I did not care about him at all. Like, I could care less about Paul.
Really?
I feel like we didn't really get to know anything about him other than he's an author and he's being terrorized by her. He, you know, because even like when he's talking to her, he talks in like 1-word sentences. You don't ever get really a sense of who he is outside of this room. And at the end of the day, like I felt like there was suspense in the fact that like Annie was crazy. So I felt like the scenes that Annie was in, she totally stole the show. And you definitely felt how unhinged she was and how she could just, her mood could flip on a dime so easily, and that's like terrifying. But I feel like I didn't care what happened to Paul. I didn't care about him. I didn't care about him as a character, and I really wanted to connect with him, and I couldn't.
I thought that he was interesting. I liked the parallels between his life and the things like with the pilings, the little memories that they would throw in there about his life. I thought were a really subtle way to give him character development without being too overly descriptive. I thought he was a really fast thinker in the way that he was able to curb her anger sometimes. Like, for an example, when they were talking about the wallet, and he wanted his wallet.
Yes, yeah, that was really
that was before he was really understanding that Annie was like this manipulative person that was keeping him there, and he didn't know yet that like she hadn't tried to get help, or he still thought the phones were down from the storm, and she's like subtly getting him hooked on pain medication.
Yeah.
But he starts to kind of come to, and he's like, yeah, where's my wallet? Like, I want my wallet. And she immediately starts to become unhinged at even the mention of it, as though he's accusing her of going through it, which she obviously did already.
Oh, yeah.
He says, oh, well, it's no offense. It's just that my father told me to always keep an eye on my wallet, and it's just something that I always live by. Like, he was just really good at being able to respond to her in a way that would curb her anger.
No, for sure.
So I thought he was really smart. Yeah. One reference I have for the memories was on for the hardcover edition, page 41. An awful memory bloomed there in the dark. His mother had taken him to the Boston Zoo, and he had been looking at a great big bird. It had the most beautiful feathers, red and purple and royal blue, that he had ever seen, and the saddest eyes. He had asked his mother where the bird came from, and when she said Africa, he had understood it was doomed to die in the cage where it lived, far away from wherever God had meant it to be. Beautiful prose, little bit of character development, childhood memory.
Yeah.
I just ate up his writing in this book. And I did like Paul. I wanted Paul to succeed. I wanted him to beat her, to get away.
I mean, yes, I did.
For him
I definitely wanted that too, but it was more like a rooting for the victim in this situation versus like Paul as a person.
She did all these fuck you things to him, taking a work of art that you had spent years of your life on, the only copy of it.
Oh my God, I know.
Your blood, sweat, and tears, your magnum opus. You think that's your fucking passion. That's your livelihood. And she makes you burn it. Right? Like, fuck you.
Oh yeah. Well, and I mean, that was actually,
I was like, fuck her.
Totally. Well, it's funny. I actually wrote this down. One of my notes was because as you pointed out, he is so quick thinking about everything that I was like, oh man, like when she wanted him to burn the manuscript, like the first thing I would have done was like, oh yeah, you're right, it deserves to be burned, but like that's why we can't though, because I need to be reminded of what not to do and like what crap this is versus what I'm capable of. Like, I don't know, some kind of mind fuckery there. And I was like, oh, where are your quick skills, Paul?
I think that he was so horrified the idea of that.
Well, yeah.
She knew that he would be.
Mm-hmm.
That was because she's so twisted. She wanted to cause him pain because he had caused her pain with Misery's death, which is Misery, if you guys don't know, is the main protagonist in Paul Sheldon, the character in this book, the main characters. It's the main protagonist for a series of romance novels that he has written centering around this character named Misery. And he hates her. He hates the character of Misery, but he's been forced to write book after book after book that he didn't want to write because of the success of Misery. Mm-hmm. And he writes his final book about Misery dying. At the very end of the book, she dies, and that's like supposed to be the end to the series. And this book series, Annie has really attached herself to over the years and is obsessed.
It's her ACOTAR
series. Mm-hmm. Yes, she is obsessed. She goes and pre-orders the book before it even comes out usually. She just loves the series, and when she reads that Paul has published the book and Misery is dead, she becomes completely unhinged.
Yeah. Like she's actually lost an actual like family member or something like that.
And then she forces him to burn the manuscript that he has been working on for 2 years, the only copy. And she knows it's the only copy because she's obsessed with him and has read every news article about his writing habits and knows that he only makes one copy.
You know, if Stephen King weren't a writer to have the perspective of a writer, I'm like, my first thought was like, what writer in their right mind wouldn't have multiple copies of their work?
It's like, this is like the worst nightmare of any author. Okay, well, like a manic fan gets a hold of you, and I wonder if like this idea came from a fan, like being crazy to him or something.
Or like I wondered in that moment, like, does Stephen King only have one copy of his work at a time? Because I've made that mistake, and that has happened to me because sideline aspiring writers, both of us. And a few years back I was working on a novel, and I had gotten a decent chunk through my outlines, my chapters, and
this hurts me just to hear it, because you were so upset.
I was just completely devastated. I left my laptop in my car. I literally was in Target for 5 minutes in the middle of the day in a crowded parking lot, and someone busted in my window, stole my laptop, and I lost all of it. And I hear you saying, oh, well, why didn't you put it on a flash drive? I did, but the flash drive was in my laptop bag with said stolen laptop.
Well, I think that also nowadays, it's
everything's on the cloud. But
everything's like on the cloud, or like but even when we were kids, it was easier to make copies. And in 1987, when this came out, this whole book, Paul Sheldon's series, have all been written on typewriters. So he just types up the manuscript and that's it. And then he just waits. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't do like copies. It's just a little bit different.
But that's also like specific to him, because he was always saying how his ex-wife would be like, you idiot, make more copies. That's stupid.
Yeah.
And like his agent, his editors, like all the people, they're like, dude, this is not professional. Like, what if something happens? He's like, no, this is my artistic process.
Also, the reason he doesn't do it, though, is because he's superstitious.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, he's superstitious. So, like, this is part of his, like, routine. And he talks about all of that in an interview that he has that Annie has read. Mm-hmm. So she knows all of this information on him that he has, like, given to the public over the years, too.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating.
It really is. And I thought I really liked, right there in that beginning part where she's forcing him to rewrite Misery and, like, or keep writing it. And...
Right. Misery Returns.
And, he just kind of throws together a little like, and now she's magically alive again because, plot armor, type of thing. And she is immediately not satisfied with that. And he's like, oh, like, I'm going to have to actually work for it. I can't just, like, write just a blase, like, oh, and she's alive again, everyone's happy. And she's like, no, she's like, you have to earn it. Like, that's not real. Like, that couldn't happen. You have to write it in a way that is actually plausible to their world that they're in. And he's like, oh, you're a constant reader. I like that term in the book.
I love the story that she tells. She tells him, like, this story of when she was a kid.
Yeah.
And she had, like, a manic episode at, like, a movie theater because they used to have like the Nickelodeons, which are just like short cartoons for kids, but they would have them in series style, and they would have them at the movie theater. So she went to go see these episodic kids show, and at the end of the episode on the To Be Continued, they went over a cliff in a car. Mm-hmm. And when she came back to see it the next week, and she'd been thinking about it, like, how did he get out of that? Like, what happened? He just wasn't in the car that had gone over the cliff.
Yeah, like,
or he like jumped out.
Yeah, he jumped out the side or whatever. She's like, no, that I saw it. Like, that didn't happen though. Like, you can't trick me. Like, why are you trying to trick me? No trick writing.
Yeah, and so and at the movie theater, this is when she was a kid, she had like a manic episode and started screaming at everybody because it didn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah, so I liked that she demanded that. And that I think...
That was a great story, though. That was a really great way to show, like, oh, wow, you've been like this since you were a kid.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, totally. And that also brought some questions for me. Like, I really wanted to know, like, more of Annie's psyche and, like, what was going on there, because, like, I feel like I have a lot of unanswered questions about her, like why the reason, like, why Annie is the way that she was. Like, was she just crazy or mentally ill? Like, was she on the spectrum? Was she bipolar? Like, was there an inciting incident that caused her to become violent or be that way? Because she seems pretty aware in some of the things that she says that she's not normal. The way that she, like, you know, she can feel when she's getting manic or something, and she goes to her, like, laughing place, as she calls it. Like, does she feel any remorse for the things that she's done? Like, because she obviously killed her father, but why? Like, was he abusive? Why did she just do it because she could? Like, why the roommate? Like, why? And then all of a sudden she turns Dr. Death or Nurse Death, and then she switches to babies. But, like, why though? And the pattern isn't consistent.
It seems to me in her personal life, like, she does this to people who actually probably see the real her. Like, you've seen me as I really am, and I just cannot abide by you moving on, knowing all these terrible things, you know, like her roommate, her, like, people that she was close to. I think she would have killed her husband if he hadn't have
I think so too. Her. Or even just like the way that she lit the building on fire and all those people died because she was basically just annoyed with the kids. Like, did they wrong her in some way? Or did they know her, like you said? Like, so, like, all of those things are definitely possible. I feel like I just wanted more clarity on...
Well, she also killed people that she felt sorry for that were poor souls.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. It was, like,
made
inconsistent
a comment
with her.
She had made a comment about the neighbor's kids to Paul and called them, like, poor dears or poor souls. And then also she killed all those infants, the elderly people that came in that were sick.
And, like, I get the elderly people more because it's like, oh, you're on your way out, I'm easing your suffering. But then that's not her MO either, because, like, with Paul, she's basically causing him suffering. And then with the babies, like, it's just, like, multiple different MOs. But I have a reference quote for this, because I just kept saying, like why? Like, and that's one thing that Paul also asks a few times, especially when he's reading the Memory Lane book and he's, like, reading all these things. For my copy, it's on page 193. He says, "But why, Annie? Like, these clippings tell me everything but that. Why? Why?" He's like, this is Annie's Book of the Dead, isn't it? But why, for God's sakes, why? With Annie Wilkes, that is a question which has no sane answer. So I kind of, especially later, like, when they are talking pretty candidly, when she's like, okay, clearly you know everything. Like, you know that I know that you know that I know that you know, type of thing. I was hoping for a little bit of probing there, because he talks about all this time that they spend together, like watching TV and having dinner, but we don't get to see any of those interactions. And I really, really wanted some of that one-on-one interaction when it wasn't her in the middle of trying to hurt him or terrorizing him, because he references all these times when they're just, like, together doing normal things like watching TV. You know, so I really wanted to see scenes like that, and then maybe have him probe a little into, like, why did you do this? Or, you know, and then we could have, like, heard it from her lips and get my villain monologue. They do.
I think that, too, we only get, you know, with Paul, we get a lot more. We get to see inside of his mind, inside of his inner workings, inside of his thinkings. But with Annie, we really only get what she decides to provide.
No, I get that. But that's what I'm saying. I wish I would have just seen scenes like that where they're actually talking about...
Well, but also, you're not going to poke the bear. Like, it's very realistic in the fact that you're not going to probe into a subject that is going to cause her to be angry, when things that she does when she is angry is make you drink mop water and cut off your foot. Like, you're going to stay away from all subjects that would make her snap. You're gonna try and establish a friendship with that person that does not bring up any of her bad traits, because you're working towards making her think that you're indispensable.
Well, and I get that for the first half of the book, but like towards the end, it's like they're both talking candidly about the fact that she's gonna kill him. So like I feel like at that point you'd have nothing left to lose, and why not try every manipulation tactic?
You do have something to lose, though, your life. You have your life to lose. That's what you have to lose.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. But she's very open about the fact that she's gonna kill him, and he's like, you know that I know that you know that you're gonna kill me. Like, let's stop pretending here.
And he's trying to get her off of that thought trail, not put her on it. Something interesting that I observed when I was reading was Stephen King was referencing a Persian tale, a Persian folk tale called, and this is like crazy spelling. I believe that it's pronounced Scheherazade. Scheherazade is a character from the Persian folk tale 1001 Nights. We know it as Arabian Nights, but the original tale from Persia is a story about a sultan who vows to take a new wife each night and have her executed the next morning. However, his latest bride, Scheherazade, succeeds in saving herself by engaging the sultan's interest in a series of interconnected tales and stories, telling him the next part of the story each evening to prevent their death. And obviously Stephen King, even Paul Sheldon's character draws a parallel between those two tales of what's going on in Misery and what happens in the Persian folktale of 1001 Nights. So he's trying to keep her entertained with his story. He's trying to, draw out the writing process for Misery's return and also develop at the same time a camaraderie between himself and Annie, which obviously sometimes does not work out in his favor at all. Sometimes he's actually right after Paul Sheldon thinks about Scheherazade is when he has that interaction with Annie over the typewriting paper.
Yes.
That smears.
Oh yeah. When he agrees to do the whole Misery rewrite or to continue the series, she goes and buys some paper, and just because she doesn't know anything about it, she buys him the most expensive paper possible because only the best for Paul Sheldon. And then when he's like, yeah, I'm gonna need different paper, she's like so insulted. She's like, but this is the best because it's the most expensive. And I asked, and he's like, okay, well, let me show you. It's like Michael Scott, like, explain it to me like I'm 5. Okay. So he has to kind of demonstrate for her because he types something out on a piece of paper and then rubs his finger across it and it smudges quite a bit. And he's like, this is great paper, but not for this type of typewriter because it's going to smudge and you're going to want it to not be that way because this is the only copy you'll have and you're going to want to reread it. And even when it's all the way dry, your finger, just the oils of your fingers will smudge the ink. And then she's like, fine, I'll get your cockadoodie paper. One thing I wrote down halfway through the book, I was like, oh man, now I'm saying cockadoodie.
Cockadoodie, yeah, Jared keeps saying it too, cockadoodie. Dirty birdie. You dirty birdie.
Dirty birdie. It's like a her version of cuss words that aren't cusses. Oh my gosh, today. Dirty bird.
Oh wait. Back when we're talking because I think what happened there with the typewriter was that Annie thought he was being condescending. And it angered her, even though he was just being informative. She doesn't react to things properly. So even the smallest of infractions, but she runs over to him and smashes her fist down on his knees.
Oh yeah, that hurt.
I wrote down, this is page 104 of hardcover edition. She screams, Gia! Gia!
I laughed at that.
It's GEEEYAHHH. She screamed and brought her fist down on the bunched salt dome that had been Paul Sheldon's left knee.
Oh, brutal.
And
Brutal.
even in the movie though, it really looks awful. Like his legs, it's very alarming.
One thing I think that obviously a movie can never properly convey the book. Like, book is always better than the movie most times, but I feel like the movie could not convey the amount of pain and suffering that he was going through, because like in the movie he's just like hauling himself off of the bed and just like crashing onto the floor, being like, ugh, I'm just gonna drag myself around. And like,
oh yeah,
in the book it's like even him like just lifting himself up to just readjust himself in the bed is just like 10 out of 10 agony. He's not just like throwing himself off of the bed and crawling around all the time the way that he is in the movie, and he's just like quietly wincing.
I felt like they didn't. Now, granted, writing a movie is way different than writing a book. Like, it has to be so much more visual. It's not as cerebral as the book is. Like, you're not getting all those like small thoughts and nuances that really help develop the story. You have to show it in a visual way. And so obviously parts like that are going to be rushed, but that is one thing that is probably one of the only things that I didn't like about the movie, because his pain and the connection between his pain and the need for the Norvell, which is the pain medication that Annie gives him, is such a constant part of the book. And
it's almost its own character, the pain.
Yeah, and I understand that that's also something that's very cerebral, that you can't, it would be difficult to convey on screen. And, you
but even physically acting it, like, he didn't look like, he looked like he was annoyed.
I agree. Yeah, he did not look like he was in agony for the first half of the book. I actually felt like he seemed like he was in more pain later. Like, but still.
And I feel like the movie version of Paul Sheldon did feel the same as the book version of Paul Sheldon, which is just like right here on the surface. And that was actually a comment that my mom made after the movie. She's like, I feel like I didn't really know him. I feel like he was just kind of blah as a character. I'm like, okay, that's what I thought too. Like, I wasn't going to say anything, but like, that was also a comment that my mom made after watching the movie. She was just like, he was always just like, oh yeah, whatever. Like, he seemed more annoyed with her than scared of her in the movie.
I almost wonder if they were just trying to move the story along, and that's why they made that choice. But it's a huge part of the book. He is in agony all the time.
One of the things I wrote down immediately, like, because I kind of took notes as I was watching the movie, as I was having a thought that I didn't want to forget. I was like, I already care more about the sheriff and his wife than I ever did about Paul.
Oh, I love the sheriff.
And he was so cute. And that was
like, I was like, oh no, he's not going to be the one that dies, right? Like, I was just so upset.
Me too. Because I cared, even in just the tiny interactions that we saw of him, you already had a sense of his character, because he was kind of smarmy, and he was kind of, he had that funny dynamic with his wife, who was also his deputy, and the way that they poked at each other. And it was so endearing right away. And so, like, and even just those brief interactions, I'm like, oh, I already care about him more than Paul. And I thought that was interesting that the movie brought in an extra POV, because in the book, of course, it's all just from Paul's perspective, being locked in this bed and in this room.
I really enjoyed that, though. It was almost like this crime-solving part to it.
Well, it was great to see what was happening on the other end of things, because obviously, and Paul kind of in the book imagines what the news must be saying about it. And he kind of has these like fantasies on what the news would be saying about, like, oh, we found Paul Sheldon's car today, the acclaimed author, blah, 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 blah. And he's like playing it out in his head. But you don't actually get to see anything outside of Paul's scope. So that was something I liked about the movie, that it kind of adds in that other half of, like, the sheriff is investigating it. Also in the movie, they find his car. And that's like really early versus in the book where it's months
washed away.
Yeah.
It's washed away. I think the only thing we really get in the book, guys, is in the scrapbook of Memory Lane. There is a clipping that she puts in there of Paul Sheldon missing from the newspaper. And that's really the only thing that we, and of course then also some kind of a deputy or law enforcement officer comes out to the house to investigate, and Annie kills him horrifically and runs him over with a riding lawnmower in the book, which they do not do in the movie.
I was genuinely
that's
disappointed.
that graphic violence. Oh, by the way, that's that graphic violence that didn't affect Tiffany in any way. Being run over in the face by a riding lawnmower is not enough for her. She needs more.
I literally wrote down, I was bummed we didn't get the lawnmower scene in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in the movie, he gets shot with a shotgun through the chest, and it's like, boom, and it's like a shock when it happens. You're like, oh my God. But because they, in the book, no, that's not what happens.
Well, when I got to that part, I was like, ooh, we're getting to the parts that Lita was talking about. But up until that part, I was like, Lita kept saying it was very graphic. I'm like, when are we going to get to that part?
Not quite.
And one of the biggest changes, like book to movie, was that in the movies, she breaks both of his ankles with a sledgehammer as opposed to cutting his foot off. Which I feel like is actually...
She puts what does she put? Like a slab of wood in between them?
Yeah, and then she just takes a sledgehammer and goes, pew, pew. And I felt like that was felt more graphic and whatever, like in a weird way than cutting his foot off.
Okay, that was more graphic than cutting someone's foot off with an axe and searing it with a blowtorch. That's more graphic.
Yes. Yes, some well, in a different kind of way.
Oh my God, stop it. I mean, I would rather someone break my ankle than chop off my foot and sear it with a blowtorch. Any day of the fucking week. Any day.
Well, you know, Paul says himself that because he didn't have his foot, that actually helped the healing process for his life. He's like, so I'm actually grateful to her that she just cut off my foot instead of...
Oh, but that doesn't mean that it's better. That doesn't mean... Well, okay, what is this thing that you do where you're like, well, the character said they're grateful for it, so it's actually good that his foot got chopped off with an axe and burnt with a blowtorch.
I didn't say it was good. I said it was better than a sledgehammer, because his legs were already shattered into 1,000 pieces, and then your feet being both of them shattered into 1,000 pieces.
Right, but
I mean, at least with the foot, you
walking,
still have one working foot.
He's walking.
You still have one working foot.
You have one working foot. That's the point. By the end of the movie, he's walking with the cane, all right. Not with the prosthetic, without his foot. Not with no foot. His feet are fixed. I mean, he's got a little bit of a hobble. No joke. No pun intended going on there. But it's not like, oh, my foot's gone. You're hilarious.
One of the things I wrote down, like right after, there's like a time jump, and then he's like waving at her through the window and he's missing a thumb, and I was like, what? We don't get to know how the thumb thing happened? What a ripoff. That's what I wrote down. And then and I was like, oh, okay, well, we learned later, but I'm like, man, like, but doing it that way really took all the suspense and fear out of that scene from that encounter, because we already know that she cuts his thumb off. So, like, by the time we kind of get, like, a flashback of that scene, all the tension and suspense is completely, like, gone from it at that point, because there's no tension to be built anymore, because we already know what's gonna happen. Also, just personal pet peeve, I really hate unnecessary time jumps. It goes straight from her chopping his foot off, and then you don't have any immediate aftermath from that, and then it's just like several weeks later. Because that was a moment that really upped the stakes of how violent she could be, because up until that point, like, she had those little bursts of like, yeehaw, I'm gonna smash you with my...
I was like, it was Gia.
Yeah, I'll smack you. But up until that point, like, we didn't.
Oh goodness.
Yeah, I'll smack you. But up until that moment, we have and Paul doesn't have any concept of the violence that she's capable of.
Oh, except that when he said one little thing she didn't like, she threw a tray across the room into the wall, and then refused to give him pain medication while she cleaned it, the whole time being like, this is your fault.
Right, but that's just her being crazy. Like, that's all. That's not her being,
and then
like,
she made
cutting his foot off. That's a huge escalation.
By the way, that made me gag. And then she made him, after she cleaned up the mess, she made him drink the mop water. The soapy, dirty mop water. Like a baby.
Yeah.
It was disgusting.
Yeah.
It made me gag. It made me fucking gag. And you're like, oh, I'm not affected. I love mop water.
I don't really have a gag reflex. I'm not easily grossed out by things.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Moving on.
Okay. No, but think about, like, that. It, like, going from, like, things like that, and, like, you know, obviously she's holding him captive, but sawing his foot off and, like,
she didn't
torching it, like, that is,
cut it with an axe.
She chopped it with an axe. Yes.
Chopped it.
She chopped it with an axe. So, like, that is a huge escalation in violence, you know. So I really wanted to see some, like, immediate aftermath of that, and, like, what their interactions were, like, right after that. You know, we just didn't get to see it, and then it was just, like, several weeks later, and she's already cut off a couple other pieces, and now it's just par for the course.
I liked in the movie how he just, like, she said something to him through the window, and he just flipped her off. He was like, so sick of pretending like I'm okay with this. Well, I'm okay with any part of this.
There was a few times through the book where I thought to myself, I feel like Lita's trailer is creepier than the book. Yeah, because your trailer is so ooky and spooky, and I was really also expecting the pig to come into play a lot more because of how creepy that pig was in your trailer. I was like, when does the creepy pig stuff happen?
She's talking about the book trailer I made. I made a book trailer for our socials, and it's pretty creepy.
Like, and, like, the pig is referenced in the book, but I kept waiting the whole time. Like, based on your trailer, I was like, when's the pig thing gonna happen?
It's
like,
just
is she gonna
pig? No, the pig's just named Misery. She has a pig named Misery. That's it. Well, she brings the pig into the room a couple of times, but no.
Yeah, but it's like her pet pig, but, like, the way it is in the trailer, it's like dangling off the side with a horrified look at it. I'm like, oh no, what happens to the pig?
That's the mystery of it. You don't know.
The whole time I was waiting for something to happen to the pig.
Oh my gosh. One part that just had me so freaked out for this book that Tiffany was not scared of. She comes into the bedroom just having some kind of a manic, like, depressive episode, which Paul references, and I have a reference quote for some of her depressive episodes. But she's having this weird like episode where she's just kind of out of it, zoned out. She's been hurting herself, like hitting herself in the face, cutting her lip open with her fingernail, like doing just really weird stuff because she's got mental health issues that are untreated. And she comes into his room in the middle of the night with a rat trap and a rat.
Oh, yeah.
And starts talking about this poor rat. And she pulls this rat out of this cage and literally squeezes it to death in front of him, talking about how it's better to put people out of their misery. Just like this really like fucked up way of saying, I'm going to kill you, basically. And she tortures.
Yeah, I forgot about the rat scene.
Squeezes this rat to death, and just a description of it, the blood spurting and the eyes popping. Like, it is so gross and realistic in my mind that it gave me the worst kinds of chills. My bowels didn't get molten and watery or anything, but it was pretty fucking gross.
That was disturbing for sure. And again, I was like, why wasn't that scene in the movie?
Because how would they put that in there?
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Some of this stuff is
but not
just
really
too much. Like, it's too.
It wouldn't be now, I think. Like, I feel like
now.
if it was a series now, it would be pretty. I feel like it'd be closer to like a Ryan Murphy experience.
I don't think so. I think it'd be better than that.
Oh, I mean, definitely better. Yeah. But just like not afraid to shy away from like those darker elements that were in the book.
I feel like, and also they have so much more.
Because it's disconcerting.
They have so much more access to special effects and things, making things look more
and
real.
they're also not afraid to push the envelope too. Like things that they just would never do in the 90s, because it's not palatable, and we just have a completely different. Because it's, as disconcerting as like the plot and the concept in the movie can be, it's also a very 90s movie,
Yeah. I think Kathy Bates is so great in it. She's so scary.
She's perfection. Also, there's two thoughts I have on this. First thought being the audiobook narrator does a phenomenal job.
Yes.
Like to the point where there's a couple times like, did they get Kathy Bates on here to also do some of the voiceovers for Annie's parts? Because the voice acting in the audiobook is just sublime. One thing I noticed in the movie though was I felt that Annie was a bit infantilized in the movie, where it doesn't accurately portray how calculated and mentally unhinged she is. Because I feel like there's some times where she's just like kind of baby talking almost and stuff, where in more than like the book, because sometimes in the book she can be simple but she's not childlike.
Yeah.
Whereas like in the movie there are a lot of scenes where she's,
I think that's hard to portray too. Well, and it's also,
does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, it's very high. I'm not saying that that's Kathy Bates's fault. I just mean like that's the way that it's kind of written for the movie.
Well, or that's the take that Rob Reiner wanted to take with it. That's the direction he wanted to go with it.
Yeah. No, and I'm not saying it's like a bad thing or a good thing. I'm just saying it was something I noticed that she felt more infantilized in the movie.
She's much more calculated than you would realize, just from all the things you hear in the book.
Yeah, well, in the book, she's much more sinister.
Well, and I think, too, that we get more in the book. Like, we get more of Annie.
Oh,
yeah,
and
we get to see more of her deranged behavior.
Yeah. One thing I will say, that the movie, even though it doesn't come anywhere close to the book, it also manages to be very, very true to the book. And almost every scene of the movie, I'm like, oh yes, this exact scene was in the book. The only scene that wasn't really in the book that was in the movie was the scene where they're having dinner and he tries to poison her. Like he had been saving all of his pills in order to do something proactive and try to poison her long enough to like use the phone, which I thought was really cool because you don't really get that in the book at all, and I liked that scene because it was also, again, one of those scenes that I was really craving from the book, where it's like, okay, where are those little moments where they're just interacting together? And like, I got that in the movie, though, because they're just, and he's just having to kind of play this, like, play act, like, okay, we're just two friends having dinner, and this isn't weird at all, you know?
Yeah.
I really liked that in the movie, and I that was one thing that I really craved from the book.
I really enjoyed that scene in the movie. That was a nice little added scene. One thing that I loved in the book, which I'm totally fine with this change in the movie or whatever, but in the movie, when Paul gets out of his room, he accidentally knocks over a penguin onto the floor, and when he puts it back on her table, it's pointed the wrong direction, and that's how she tells that he's been out of his room. And in the book, this is so fucking crazy, okay? In the book, she knows that he has been out of his room and that he has been through her scrapbook of all of her dirty birdie deeds, because she takes strands of her hair, pulls them out of her head, and then wraps them around the book in the doorways, in places that if you would move that, it would break the strand of hair to tell if anybody had gone through those things or had been into those rooms or had been opened her scrapbook. I mean, that is so crazy. I thought that was so crazy that they didn't put that in the movie, because that is fucked up.
I know.
I
agree.
Little, that's like one of those cool little nuances that you can only get from reading the book. And just the thought of how fucking weird that is. Like, just those little habits that somebody who was a serial killer would do that you wouldn't even think about. Like, how does he come up with this stuff? I just thought it was so brilliant.
Right? Well, there were a couple, what movie? I don't know, there's been like a couple of like those like spy espionage type movies where they'll do stuff like that, like put a piece of tape or a piece of string to be able to tell if something had been disturbed. So it felt to me like, oh wow, that's pretty advanced thinking for someone who seems so unhinged. And those little moments of just like supreme calculation undermined this like idea that she's out of her mind and doesn't actually know what she's doing, because in reality she's extremely calculated with a lot of things.
Well, yeah, because crazy,
and she's very intelligent.
Crazy does not mean stupid. Crazy, just because you're a little crazy, you know, or a little, that doesn't mean you're stupid and that you don't know what's really going on around you. And I think that is something that Paul failed to realize on many occasions, including that conversation with the paper. Like, he was kind of being a little bit condescending, and thinking, wow, I can like kind of belittle her this way. And she was like, yeah, I'm not stupid. I know what you're doing. Fuck you. And I'm going to break your knees. Like, breaking your knees. Give me that salt dome.
But, you know, it's interesting that, though, and maybe this is also like a little bit of like narcissism coming into it, because when she is getting what she wants and expects from Paul, her tone definitely changes with him, and it's much easier. Like, once he kind of like finds her vein, it's a lot easier for Paul to manipulate her, especially when it comes to the misery books and writing. And it's like, okay, I've accepted the fact that you're going to kill me, but let's just like, I'm going to need this much time, you know, because you don't want to kill me, because I'm going to do the book and this and that. So
we've got to find the end. We've got to fix what's broken together. Mm-hmm. Very smart. Scheherazade.
Scheherazade.
Oh, I have a quote too.
What?
That since Scheherazade came up, this is for us, okay? And for anybody who has listened to Iron Flame, our episode of Iron Flame, in the same sentence that he mentions Scheherazade, he says, and this is on page 91 of the hardcover edition, he had...
Oh no, this is...
Oh no! You haven't seen it? No!
I definitely do. I know exactly what you're about to say.
He had dreamed that Annie Wilkes was Scheherazade, her solid body clad in diaphanous robes.
Diaphanous robes.
I literally cannot stop seeing. I never knew what that was. I literally cannot stop seeing the word diaphanous. It's everywhere now. I'm like, what? How did I never know this word existed before like 2 months ago?
I know. I feel like there's always like a weird synchronicity between every book that we do, and I'm like, oh, there's that one, the diaphanous. Like, okay, the diaphanous robes.
And if you don't know, guys, diaphanous means sheer, basically.
Yes. One other thing from that was different from the book to movie, which I feel like raised not the stakes, but also just showed how calculated Paul was towards the end, and he was like, okay, I know what the game is now, so I'm playing the game. When he goes to burn his Misery manuscript, like he finishes it and he like, teases her with it, and he's like, this is what you've been waiting for. And then it's like the ultimate payback from what she made him do at the beginning of the book when she forced him to burn his manuscript, like the one thing that mattered most to him. And then in the end he turned it around full circle and like, I'm gonna fucking burn it, bitch. And she's like, oh my god, no, please no. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm doing it. I'm fucking doing it.
I'm burning it, bitch.
I'm burning this shit. But it was all a trick because he systematically hid the real pages of the manuscript in the walls, like because he found some loose floorboards and baseboards in the room, and he hid the real manuscript, and he had just used his scrap paper to stack up what she thought was the manuscript in a total like, if I ever get out of this, it's still going to exist somewhere. And that's why when he's trying to escape, he has the chance to like lock her in and burn it down, but he's like, but my manuscript is still in there. I can't burn the house down because then I'll lose another masterpiece.
Yeah, in the movie, they don't really do that. They don't show you that he saves it. He just burns it.
Yeah, and my mom was like, why didn't he just do... And I told her, I was like, well, in the book, he's done that. And she's like, oh, that would have been cool to know. What a great idea.
Right? My favorite part of the movie was when they were fighting on the ground and he started shoving the papers in her mouth saying, fucking eat it! I was like, yeah! Fuck you!
Oh, and then that final confrontation is much more gruesome in the books because like her whole front is like on fire. And like her clothes are burned off, and he's doing that shoving down the mouth thing, but they're like ashy, and he's like suffocating her with the burnt ashes of the pages, and he's like, fucking eat it, bitch.
Well, I feel like too in the movie, they're about the same size, I would say, but in the books, like Annie is described as being a very large, not heavy set,
Rotund.
but just heavy. Like, she's just solid.
Hefty.
Yeah.
Stocky.
And,
like stocky,
tall and strong. I actually have a reference for that on page 68. She put me in while I was conked out, he thought. Lifted me, dead weight. Christ, she must be strong. Like, she has, like, a strong nurse's body. Just very stocky, farmhand kind of body.
Strong as an ox.
I mean, in the state that Paul is in, overpowering someone with that stature would probably be next to impossible unless you have some kind of an upper hand, like throwing a typewriter at their face while they're on fire.
Yeah. While they're on fire.
And in the book as well, like in the movie, he just kind of smashes her in the face, and it's just enough. Like, there's enough cranial damage to where she dies. But in the book, he actually locks her in his bedroom, and it says that she crawls out of the window and succumbs to her injuries on the way back to kill him with the chainsaw.
I see, that was one thing that I was like, again, I wish we could have seen that play out in real time, because we don't find that out until it's like several months later, and he's kind of recounting some of those memories, like he's already been rescued, and it's like, turns out, and again, it kind of felt like that, Nancy, you're like, well, turns out she was coming to kill me with a chainsaw, but that didn't happen.
He didn't know what that was after the authorities came there, and he was in the house, that they found her dead in the snow or on the ground with the chainsaw, and she just like collapsed basically from her massive injuries, her head trauma, and she probably fell out of the window, and I don't know. In the book, wait, were they on the second story in the book? Is there a staircase?
I don't think there was a second story in the book. I think it was just like the basement and then just the main level.
Oh yeah, okay. So it's like a farmhouse, like a typical one floor farmhouse.
And that's and in the movie he kills her in the house. And but I actually laughed out loud a little bit during that confrontation in the movie when he knocks her out with the typewriter, and she's like passed out, and then he's like kind of army crawling away, and all of a sudden she's like, yeah, and she like hops on him like, you're gonna crawl away from me, and he's like, oh my god, get off of me.
I was like, I'm so jumpy, like in any kind of like, shit. And of course, like, there'd been enough time.
Yeah, nothing phases me.
Did you hear I say Ben? I said bean. There's been enough time.
Bean.
There's
been enough time.
It's the fresh wine.
I miss you.
Do you know what I picture? Like a guy in a suit with like the curly mustache. You know, the kind of guy that ties women to railroad tracks. Like the guy from Meet the Robinsons.
Yeah. I always picture Lumiere from Beauty and the Beast, and he's like, and she's like, I've been burned by you before. And she's like, like fooling around in the drapes.
That seems unsafe for a candlestick. Just saying.
Very.
Just saying.
Well, I mean, even she said, like, I've been burnt by you. Like, you've tried to get some action with it. I've been burnt by you before. And he's like, and then he, like, drops her. And she's like,
yeah, because Belle got out of her room.
Zootala, she has emerged!
If she doesn't eat with me, she doesn't eat at all.
Well, I am a little hungry. Hear that? She's hungry. Like, let's go to the kitchen. That's what happens in my brain every time I want to snack.
I'm not about to let the poor girl starve.
Start the fire.
Break out the china.
Remember what the master said. I feel like realistically, if I were in that house as an employee, I would totally be Cogsworth. Like, oh my god, what are you guys doing? Like, we have rules. We have things in place to avoid disaster. Can everybody just stick to the rule book?
This guy is crazy. Well, that's what
like, this is a...
But that is Cogsworth. He's the voice of reason. Fine, a crust of bread, and then... He's like, all right, let's get this over with as quickly as possible. And they're like, let's have a dance scene. And he's like, this is not a good idea. I don't like this.
And then they get caught. He's like, it was all his fault. I tried to stop it, but he didn't listen to me.
Fucking snitch.
Normally, I am very anti-prequel, or like when they do shows or like limited series and it's like, this is before the event that we all know about. But I would actually really be interested in watching like a limited series of like the early years of Annie Wilkes, and then like getting to the Paul Sheldon climax. Like, I think that would be really awesome.
Right. I would like, you know what? I would like a book. I wish that Stephen King would revisit this. And originally, when he published this was published in 1987, he was planning on writing it under a pseudonym. And he wasn't able to do that because something was leaked. And everybody knew that he was coming out with this book, or that he had written it. So they just decided to let him just go ahead and publish it. And I actually have a little comment there. The novel's title, and this is just a bit of misery trivia, the novel's title has two meanings. It is the name carried by the central heroine of Paul Sheldon's book series, Misery, and King described such a state of emotion that he was feeling during the novel's writing. He has stated that Annie is a stand-in for his addiction to cocaine. King has outlined the creation of Misery in his memoirs and mentioned that the image of Annie Wilkes came to him in a dream. King planned the book to be released under the pseudonym Richard Bachman, but his identity was discovered before the book's release, and they decided to just have it be written by Stephen King instead.
Good. Because it ends up being one of his most, well-known and loved novels.
I'd love to crack into a few more.
I'm really excited to read more of his books. Like, I know what I said earlier. Like, I that's just me being honest. Like, I was a little underwhelmed, but I liked it though. Like, it was still, it was still really enjoyable.
Through our discussion, you can change your mind. Just saying. You reserve the right to change your mind about anything. Due to our discussion.
I do, and I will and have. I will say that some of the points that you made make Paul feel a little bit more valid than he ever felt to me while I was reading it.
You're so stubborn.
I am not.
You're so stubborn. That made me feel so good, what you just said.
Oh, well, I'm glad you feel good, but like, I am not stubborn. I just usually once I have a thought, I have it until you can change my mind.
Maybe not stubborn. Maybe
it's not like I'm sitting on my. I'm not I'll die on this hill kind of person. I just I think what I think, and unless you can provide a decent argument, then I pretty much, so I
know
I
how I
do
feel about that. Okay, maybe stubborn was a strong word. Maybe the word I'm looking for is decisive. You're decisive about your opinions, and so am I. We're both very decisive people, and you're right. Prove me wrong.
It makes me feel it makes me feel the way that I felt. But I will say okay, I can totally see what you're saying, like the way that Paul is this and that. I did actually like the way that I felt the movie did better at, in some ways for me, in making Paul more relatable. Because in the movie, he has a daughter.
Oh, yeah.
And he keeps talking about how, I was on my way to my daughter's party. And it just gives you more of a sense of his life outside of, that room. And it gave him a little bit more character development having that.
I really cared about his character by the end of the movie. I think at the beginning, I was like, okay, I don't really like what he's doing with the Norville. The pain medication. But one thing I really liked about the Norville is that Rob Reiner made the pills bright red, which I did put into our book trailer because I loved that little, because I was like, man, they're just so, they really make your eyes really attach to that on the screen. Your eyes just immediately go to the pill. It's so unusual to see a pill that's bright blood red, just super red.
Yeah.
I really liked that addition to make the pills be more central to the story. Hey, these are significant. Hey, Look at these.
And one thing that I thought was really interesting in the book that you don't really get from the movie too is that Paul is very aware of the fact that he's becoming an addict.
Oh, yes.
But he's also like, but there's also like, but my legs are in an excruciating amount of pain. This is future Paul's problem. Like, he can go through detox later, but right now I need that.
I need them.
I need these pills. Not just like not in the way just like an addict would need them, which is also true, but like just for the pain, because he's in a horrific amount of pain. And he's like, if I'm going to survive this, like, I also have to keep some of my mental wits about me. And the only way to do that is to lessen some of the pain. So there were times where he tries to stretch out the doses because he's like, I don't want to become an addict on top of everything else because I know how hardcore these drugs are. But then him quickly realizing that that is just not feasible in his current situation.
Oh, yeah. No. He's like, well, and when he describes, well, what he's really doing is he's taking the pain medication to escape the pain, of course, and they help with his pain management. But it also describes like the state that he goes in when he takes the pills, and it kind of references this image that he had when he was a child of a shoreline with wood pilings in it, and how the wood piling farther out to sea when he's
it's kind of like floating. The tide coming in and out.
Yes. Yeah. While he's like floating, because I mean, you're also like, it's taking the pain away, but you're getting high at the same time, and it puts you in like a dreamlight state, like that kind of medication. And he just keeps referencing, so it becomes part of the story, like the wood pilings and the tide and the oceans, in reference to when he takes the medication or when he's on the medication.
I really loved that visual with the pilings specifically. I was like, what a beautiful way to write that. I will say that there were some times in the book where I was a little bit too much of simile type writing for my personal taste. I feel like there's a time and a place for it, but especially in the middle, I feel like, I'm like, okay, let's move it along.
What do you mean by simile?
Or like the, where you're always comparing it to, like, it's as though it was like this and this and that, and you're like kind of always comparing something to something else.
Yeah.
I should have maybe done a couple of reference quotes, but there was just a lot of that in the middle, and that's just like a personal preference.
Oh, yeah.
I don't particularly care for that in writing, but here and there, like, it's good, and I like those comparisons. But when I don't like it when it becomes like the majority of the prose, then I'm just like, all right, move it along. Or like I have an idea chapter when he's talking about getting inspiration for writing. It's like, when you have an idea, it's like this, and when you have an idea, it's like this, and when you have an idea, it's like this. And it went on for. I was like, all right, I was like, all right, I understand. Move it along.
I think that this book really showcases Stephen King's amazing writing, and it really is such a cerebral experience to go through what Paula is going through in this book. And I understand that some people can find it boring. In fact, most of the 1-star reviews on Goodreads are referencing how boring they found the book. But I really loved this book from beginning to end. I thought it was beautifully written. It's so smart and intelligent and messed up. It takes your mind to places that you would never think it could go. And just to be able to write this kind of a book and put you in the mind of someone going through like that is so masterful. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, I agree with all those things, but I also agree that there were lulls occasionally where it did get boring for a second. I'm like, okay, and this is when I was like, okay, but we'll get back to Annie and Paul. Like, let's see some of their interactions, or because he talked a lot about like the calendar picture, or his view from the window. And I get that it's like, creating a setting and an environment, but there were some times where I'm like, all right, but I also just like wanted more of Annie too. Because we just kind of get snippets of her in and out, and I actually just like really wanted more of Annie.
Well, I think that that's like a really cool part that they could have brought into the film that they chose not to, because in the book, everything that you're getting is only what Paul is getting. You only have the tools that Paul is given in the book. It's completely from his perspective from the beginning all the way through to the end, and that is consistent. But in the movie, you're kind of seeing some other viewpoints. So I actually think it would make a good prequel film. If you could ever dare to try and top Kathy Bates, brave soul, whoever you may be.
Good luck.
Yeah. Because she's amazing in this movie, and she's amazing in general, and it would be, and also she won Best Actress, and she also won Best Actress in a Drama at the Golden Globes as well for this film. So it's just like she swept all the awards all the way across.
I love that. She deserved it for sure. And it's interesting because now that we've talked about it the way that we have, some of the things I was frustrated about with our lack of knowledge of Annie and her backstory, it also kind of probably echoes how Paul felt, being like, I really wish I had more context for this person. So maybe that lack of information is intentional, because like we're left with the same questions that Paul is also left with, like, why, Annie, why
Yeah, well, and I think that is also a huge part of mental illness, is that sometimes there is no answer. Sometimes you don't get an answer when it comes to things like this. Like you really just don't know what makes people be the way that they are. Sometimes the world makes them that way. Sometimes the system is set up for them to fail. Sometimes they're born that way. And also this time period this takes place in, there wasn't really a whole lot for these kinds of issues back in the day. There wasn't a whole lot of ways to recognize them or treat them. And it just gets worse and worse and worse.
To that point, recently I lost someone very close to me who struggled with mental illness, and you don't really understand, like you see it in books, film, things, TV, but I've never really watched someone struggle in that way and how unpredictable it can be. And when and maybe that's part of why I'm frustrated, because I want the why, and there's just no, sometimes there is no answer to it, and my brain and just the human brain in general always wants answers to the questions, and sometimes there just aren't any, and that's hard. And I will say that obviously none of that had happened when I read the book, but now that we're talking about it, I feel like I'm looking at certain things just in a different way because of things that have happened recently, and losing a very close friend. Spin on the importance of mental health.
Tiffany and I have both lost people that went through severe mental illness that has like caused or aided them in not being here anymore. And it is a very difficult subject to navigate. And we are not making fun of people that have mental illness in any way, or,
Yes.
We talk about books. That's what we do. We don't really have a ton of knowledge when it comes to what people are going through. But obviously, this subject is going to bring up some issues like that. Obviously, Annie Wilkes had a severe mental illness from a very young age that was not treated in any way. And there could have been circumstances that contributed to her mental illness when she was younger that we don't know about. But in general, we are very sympathetic to people that struggle with mental health. And that is not our intention to poke fun at these people or and actually I think that this book brings to light subjects that are uncomfortable for people to think about and talk about.
Yeah.
Sometimes there isn't a good ending for people that are struggling with mental health. And that's kind of what we come to. And even in this book, and at the very end, Paul Sheldon says that he is connected to Annie forever because of what she did to him, but not just because of what she did. Like, some of it has to do with the fact that she couldn't help who she was. Some of those things were probably not intentional. They were just part of her mental health deteriorating over time. And that's something that he has to live with.
And maybe, and maybe that also affected the way that I read the book too. Like, my frustration with certain aspects of it mirrored some of my own frustrations with real life situations and wanting there to be more reasons or concrete answers or more information.
Well, dude, reading is cerebral.
You just don't get that.
Reading is cerebral.
I just know that I felt a kind of way when I read it, and I do remember, like, when I closed the book, I remember just like feeling like, well, dang it, I don't feel resolved. I don't feel satisfied with the conclusion of the ending, and kind of the way that, like, it kind of fast forwards to later, and he's kind of like living his life, and maybe that's part of the journey too. But I don't know. I just like, I felt a little unsatisfied with the ending, but maybe that's also part of the point.
Well, in the book too, everything comes completely full circle, and he actually publishes Misery's Return because he had the copy hid away, and it's a massive success. And then he picks up writing other things. And he decides to decline writing an all-tell book about his experiences with Annie. Even though it would probably be an automatic bestseller, he decides no. And in the movie, he just picks up writing a different book. He has that published instead. But in the book, it's like, this is one of the best things I've ever written. And he actually decides that he has a deeper appreciation for Misery and Misery's character in the book that he's created, and he's glad that he wrote it.
Yeah.
Because at the beginning he hated his Misery character, and he wanted it to be over. And it's like, it kind of, he had some like writer's block and things like that were occurring because of his trauma. But at the end of the day, he has good things to take away from that experience, because you have to find the good in things to keep moving forward.
Well, and he fell in love with that story and that character, and then it's like he was so bitter about it for so long that he was like, fuck this shit. And then as he was writing it and discovering like the love of it and all that stuff, it's like he rediscovered something about,
about the books that he had lost,
himself or his writing. Yeah, and like the characters that he created, and finding a new appreciation for them because of the situation that he was in.
And he's almost grateful to Annie because of that, which is bizarre. That you would think that somebody could establish like that kind of a feeling over someone that put you through so much horrific trauma.
But also, like, because one thing that you do get from Paul Sheldon from the get is that he does have quite a bit of an ego. And that's also another reason why he wants to distance himself from the Misery books, because he wants to be taken seriously as a
and he thinks
author.
He's too good for the Misery books. Like, his writing's better than that.
Yeah, that's it. So as much as Annie terrorizes him and tortures him, I think that there is a part of him that also really got off on her worship of him and her adoration of him. Also, there was like a little tiny tidbit in the book that is not in the movie, is that her older brother is also named Paul.
Oh, really? I missed that. I must have I just didn't absorb it.
And Yeah, and Paul noted it. He's like, oh, her brother is Paul too. That's interesting. So it's like there's no real reason or connection. It was just like one of those like little interesting synchronicities that's like, is that playing a part in it? Or is it just like a coincidence, but it's also just like noteworthy?
I also, you know what? I also think it's noteworthy that what you said is so important because, and this is why like cancel culture really gets under my skin, because everybody is going through something different in their life. You know, there are people that are in a good place. There are people that are in a bad place. There are people that are struggling. There are people that are flourishing and not struggling at all. And everything that you're going through affects how you perceive the world. And when you're reading a book like this, you know, Tiffany had a completely different experience of me because of what she's going through in her life right now, which is valid. And that is why no one should ever get offended at other people's opinions of what they experience when they go through, when they read. Because what's happening in your life can affect the way that you do anything. Read, watch, see, anything. And that is important, to be able to respect other people's opinions and not try to make it into something like, well, I feel this way, you should feel this way too. Why don't you feel this way? Because of my pain. And, you know, just by talking about things and sharing things with each other and not being judgmental of other people's opinions, you can discover things that you didn't know that you knew all along.
Yeah. Or just like everybody's going to view things through a different lens just because of who they are, their personality, their likes, their dislikes, their road in life.
And that is fine. That's okay.
Yes. And that's why we welcome all opinions here.
You bunch of cocky doody dirty birdies.
Exactly right. And that is, I think, the true spirit of book club. It's like, well, what did you think about it? Well, this is how I felt. Like, what did you think? And sometimes you're going to totally agree, and sometimes you're going to disagree because you're coming from different places, or it made you feel a different kind of way, and that's beautiful, and that's storytelling.
That's right. Oh, I like that. And there's storytelling.
There's beauty in that, and there's also beauty in the different opinions, because when you do have different opinions, it just like tonight, like it opens up a whole nother conversation of like, okay, well, why is my opinion different, and let's explore it instead of just be like, well, how dare you not love Stephen King as much as I loved Stephen King.
It's okay to, you know, I think it's still okay to scoff though, like be like, oh, how dare you? But more like in a comedic way, and not in like a how dare you.
Anytime someone says like, no, exactly. It's like the memes that I make all the time. It's like, oh, when someone insults my favorite book, I'm like, I'm sorry. Did I hear correctly? Like,
I know, because that's like your initial reaction sometimes, like, or like Denise said, wow, you must. You must need to
I don't need to be friends with you.
You just need to have more orgasms in your life. Obviously. That is a reference to our ACOTAR episode, A Court of Thorns and Roses, our first Bookmate Besties episode. So if you like A Court of Thorns and Roses, go listen to that episode.
And my sister is on there, and she's way more savage than I am, and
she's so fun though. I love it.
She's so fun.
I can't wait to do our next.
But it's as much as it's fun, and well, that's the thing. Is like we have fun poking fun, but we're not letting it like affect our lives in any.
And we don't actually care. So like.
And we don't actually care, which is why we can poke fun at it.
If we hurt your feelings about your favorite book, like we really don't actually care that we did, because not everybody likes the same things. That's just how it is.
And that's why there's so many books, because when people say they love a book that I didn't particularly care for, I'm like, I love that for you. You must be on a completely different journey than me. If this was a 5-star for you, good for you. I'm glad that exists for you.
Yeah, right.
And I'm glad that my 5 stars exist for me. And that's why there's room for everyone at the table.
This is a round table. No rectangles here.
Exactly. We're knights of the round table.
We dance whenever able.
I have a few quotes. We kind of already gone over a couple of them with the diaphanous one and then the hot watery bowels one.
Okay. All right. Well, guys, it's time for quotes, which means we've come to the end of our discussion until the sidebar, which is coming post tense. Is that the right way to say that?
Post tense.
Post tense. My good man. We're getting into quotes.
Oh my God. Okay. Do you want to go first?
Yes. Page 55. Ooh. She looks like a widow who just got fucked after a 10-year dry spell. I loved that line. That's the whole quote.
I don't know why I'm laughing so hard at that. Oh, that's a good one. Me?
You.
Me.
Your turn.
Okay. It's a little bit of a quote, but also a bit of a note. That I just thought was like a really interesting synchronicity that it made me think of. On my version, the paperback version, it's page 207. This is during the Memory Lane book clippings. Yes. It's when Paul gets to his own missing clipping in the newspaper. Reported missing Paul Sheldon, 42, novelist best known for his series of romances about sexy, bubble-headed, unsinkable Misery Chastain. And I just thought that was so like interesting wordage, because Kathy Bates would also go on to play the unsinkable Molly Brown in Titanic just a few years later. And it just made me think of that, because it's just such a random adjective that I noted it.
I love it. Love it. Okay.
I'm going to find that clip for that.
Oh, please do. For the YouTube with visual stimulation, if you like to be visually stimulated. Okay, page 94. Hilarious. Love it. The line is just fiddle-dee-foof. Fiddle-dee-foof.
Fiddle-dee-foof.
Foof. F-O-O-F. Fiddle-dee-foof.
What a cock-a-doodie word.
What a cock-a-doodie word. I love it. I was like, using that immediately forever.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay, that's my next one. In my book, it's page 311. And the Paul's in the room and he sees all the news reporters show up at the house. He goes, Paul said, "Oh God," Paul said, frozen somewhere between humor and amazement and horror. "What's this fuckaroo?"
You fuckaroo? What? How does this?
No, fuck. Fuckaroo, like fuck dash a dash ROW. Fuckaroo. What's this fuckaroo?
Oh my God, Stephen King's hilarious. I love it.
What's this fuckaroo? And again, I'm using it forever now. What is this fuckaroo?
This is an Annie line from page 113 that I am using forever. So hilarious. It's strictly Mickey Mouse, Paul. Just stay cool. It's strictly Mickey Mouse. Just stay cool, Paul.
Just relax, okay? I know I've cut off your foot and stuff, but it's just Mickey Mouse. Like, just be cool,
But
Paul,
I
be cool.
cauterized it.
All right, my last quote. page 219 of the paperback, which I thought was just like a fun nod. He said he'd gotten an assignment from a magazine in New York. He was going to go up to the old hotel and sketch the ruins. His pictures were going to be with an article that they were doing. It was a famous old hotel called the Overlook. It was burned down 10 years ago. Oh. The caretaker burned it down. He was crazy. Everybody in town said so, but never mind, he's dead. I was like, oh, that's... And I just know, I haven't read The Shining, but I knew that was a reference to The Shining. So I felt like that was a cool little Easter egg kind of.
That is really cool. I like that. Yeah, the Overlook is the hotel from The Shining, guys.
From The Shining, yeah.
Yes. Which I think would also make a great book movie discussion. There's so many Stephen Kings that would be great book movies. I love it.
I love it. There's so many book movies in general we could do.
There's so many books, okay? Do you know that even though, guys, another trivia for you. Here you go.
Oh, tell me, my goodman.
Stephen King is world renowned for his horror books. Usually horror is what would be his books. But he has also written over 200 short stories that are in compilation books. And I have read some of these short story books. I've read Everything's Eventual. There's a couple others that I've just read like some of the short stories from and not the entire thing. But he has some fantastic short stories, and some of them have become amazing films. Like The Shawshank Redemption is a short story.
Yes. I actually learned that recently, that Shawshank was Stephen. I was like, really? I did not know that.
Fantastic. He is a wonderful, wonderful author. And sometimes you can just get just a little snippet of a story, and that's enough. You know? It's kind of like Goosebumps, but 100 times better. But not cheesy.
Sidebar, Rose is super into Stephen King right now, so we should have her pick one that she hasn't read yet, and we should do a bookmate bestie with Rose on a Stephen King book.
I love that idea. Rosie's the best, guys. Rosie's the best. She made me pee my pants. Literally made me pee my pants with a
during our trip
dirty joke, and I laughed immediately, peed my pants. It was so awful. I was like, I can't believe I just did that. I need to work on my pelvic floor. So genuine.
Shout you out, Rose. We love you.
I would love to have Rosie on. Okay. I've got a couple serious ones, just ones that I enjoyed that I read.
Close us out.
Yeah, and I didn't write down the page numbers for the last three. I just marked them with my highlighter. So
that's okay.
Yeah. So writers remember everything, especially the hurts. Strip a writer to the buff, point to the scars, and he'll tell you the story of each small one. From the big ones, you get novels. A little talent is a nice thing to have if you want to be a writer, but the only real requirement is the ability to remember the story of every scar.
Like
Beautiful.
that. Yeah.
Loved that. I was like, wow, that is
slow clap.
That is such like a little bit of probably a real feeling that Stephen King has about writing. That is just inside of this piece of fiction that is amazing. And I just loved that. I ate that up. Another one I have is art consists of the persistence of memory.
Ooh, say it again.
Art consists of the persistence of memory.
It's fucking deep.
Maybe like that want or desire or need or passion to make that memory last and be outside of your own mind. I love that idea.
I love that.
It's so true.
That's really good.
Yeah. And then this is my last quote. Confucius say, if man wants to grow 1 row of corn, first he must shovel 1 ton of shit.
Yeah, damn straight.
which
So
made me
good.
chuckle and also was like, oh,
But also,
yeah,
yeah.
if you, it's
Yeah,
so
you
true.
do. You do. You really do. Cheers.
That is it. That's
Cheers.
all I have. Cheers. Okay.
1-star reviews.
We really need a sound because that is so weird.
We need a sound.
it.
Okay.
We need a
1-star
sound.
reviews.
Does anyone have an idea?
What? Oh,
Does
that's a
anyone
great
have an
idea.
Oh yeah. Does anyone have an idea for 1-star review sound or sound bit?
Want to submit your own soundbite for our 1-star review?
Or just tell us about a soundbite if you don't want to go through the trouble, and we'll find it because we are good at those things. Okay, 1-star reviews.
Well, I'm excited. I'm excited.
Okay, most people rated this book 5 stars. All right, out of 764,000 ratings, roundabouts. Most people
That's
rate
it?
this book.
I feel like there should be more ratings than that for this book.
That's accurate. That's off Goodreads. This is.
I mean,
just on
obviously
Goodreads.
it's accurate. It's surprising to me that it's not a higher number.
I know. Most people rated this book 5 stars. Average rating of 4.23 out of 5. 46% rate this book 5 stars. The least amount of people rated it 1 star at 1%, but that is still roughly 8,500 people, roundabouts.
Wow.
So there's a lot of people that gave this book 1 star, and I have some of those reviews, and I have a lot of them because they're hilarious.
Okay, I'm
and
ready.
here we
I'm
go.
So ready. I'm so ready.
Usually we have like just like 5 or 6, but this time I've got like 10, and I love all of them. Alia says, "This book made me miserable." Caitlin says, "The inside of Stephen King's head must be a terribly unpleasant place."
Well, yeah, but that produces good books.
Big Mama Jamma says, or is it Big Mama Jamma? Is it? I don't know. Mama
She's
Jamma.
Big
Big Mama
Mama
Jamma
Jamma.
says, would kidnap Stephen King and torture him if it meant he never wrote another book.
Oh my god! That is harsh. Jesus. Wow. Okay.
Lake
Put them on a list.
Lakesia says, in most cases, the book is better than the movie. In this case, the movie is better than this cockadoodie book. Bonnie says, no doubt there are many Stephen King fans who loved this book, but personally, I am not into reading about chopping off a foot and then blowtorching the wound shut. Just a random example. I guess my tolerance for gruesome acts isn't that great. You know, for this non-violent book that we read, Tiffany.
I never said that. I just said I was preparing myself for a lot worse based on your feedback.
Katie says, this book was so scary that I got freaked out and lost my Kindle. 3 days later, I found my Kindle on top of my car, in my windshield. This book was so scary that it messed with my Kindle placing skills. I love that one. It's so real. like you just got so freaked out, you just closed it and was like, ah! It just threw. Like, get it away from me! And then like had a total
Get
brain
thee
fart.
behind me.
Like, oh my gosh, what has Stephen King done to me? Tarneem says, only Stephen King can take an amazing idea concept and butcher the hell out of it.
Wow. How does one butcher that concept?
I feel like he butchered it pretty well. Maddie says, "We get it, Mr. King. You hate women."
Ooh.
Oh, let me tell you something. Yes, right. Okay, I said that because I wanted to get your reaction. Like, what do you think about that? Because I will say that there was a pretty consistent thing in the 1-star reviews of people referring to Stephen King as highly misogynistic, very like anti-woman, like fat phobic. Those were some of the words that I was seeing. And I was kind of wondering what your opinion is on that. Like, what do you think about that?
Wow. I feel like this is the fat phobic thing with Evelyn Hardcastle all over again. I didn't get that at all. Like, she's mentally unstable and she happens to be a woman. That's not him making a declaration that all women are mentally unstable. Like, just because he's writing that character.
I think they're referencing like his descriptions of women in his writing. Like the way that he describes Annie.
Okay, so I would say that that's not so much of a commentary on Stephen King's view of women so much as Paul's, because I also got that from Paul, that he just like was kind of egocentric, selfish, and again, kind of why I didn't care about his character that much, because he did kind of have that crass view. But that's Paul's viewpoint. Like, that it really bothers me when people in 1-star reviews like blame the author for characters' flaws. Like, he's writing a flawed character. Like, you can't apply those things to the author, like, because he's writing a realistic character.
Right.
Or
I love that you're saying all of this, because that's exactly how I feel. Yes.
Like
it's part of the realism of the character.
Right. And Paul is, and that's the thing about Paul, and this is kind of why I didn't care about him as much, because like there's nothing about Paul that is endearing. Kind of like the way like the sheriff and his wife in the movie immediately is endearing and you care about them. I cared about Paul in the fact that he's being held against his will by an unstable person. And I wanted him to get out of it, and I didn't want her to have the last word. But other than that, like, he was kind of a dick. And even, like, he had the bit of an ego, you know, because, like, we were talking about earlier, like, he felt like he was too good for his success with the Misery books. And, like, I want to be taken seriously as a real author. And I'm going to get drunk and drive my car in a snowstorm. Like, and that's another thing, too, that he never takes accountability for, is the fact that, like, he got in that situation because of his own recklessness, because he got drunk on champagne and then decided to drive in a Colorado snowstorm. So, like, that's also, like, his fault, and he never takes any sort of accountability for that. You know,
that is true. I didn't think about that, but you're right. He's not a really great person.
He's not a great person,
and, like,
so it was
that's
hard
great
to
character development.
And
right?
maybe that was part of it. Like, maybe it was like I don't care about Paul because there was a lack of character development, because there was character development. I just didn't like him as a person, as a character. And I think that that's also kind of plays into Annie's maybe because she has an idea of her mind of who Paul Sheldon is, because he created Misery and now he's her idea of him. Her idea of him, and he's totally not that person who's like romantic and idealized, and the way that she's romanticized him,
like with
also
the cussing
in her head.
in his new novel.
Yes.
You dirty birdie.
You dirty
bird.
No, but I 100% think that it's really annoying when people apply characters' flaws in the novels to the writer. I think that's super unfair. Super unfair.
I think that is unfair too. And I actually think that shows, I don't know, I think it's just vicious.
Well, and it's also a clear prejudice from the other person. Whoever's reading that book and interpreting it in that way obviously is very insecure about that, because they've probably been made to feel that way by other people. So when they read that perspective, they put that blame on the author, as opposed to them just writing a flawed character who
Now it's okay
is
to like wonder,
shitty.
like, I wonder if they think about sex this way. But
Right.
like, you don't really know.
We've had that discussion.
You don't really know what the author is like in real life. They're creating something that's not real. All of it's not real. It's all
Well, that's
character.
also like, well, that's also gonna try to apply, like, if you're gonna make that rule for that one thing, then you have to apply everything. It's like, obviously every author is not their villain.
All right. We're sidebarring. Let's get back
Okay.
on here.
We are the sidebar. Okay, sorry.
Mika says, it's a freaking miracle I didn't throw up while reading this. Dude was so whiny. Like, okay, we get it. You're being tortured and shit. But for real, bro, woman up, rolling eye emoji. Your face. I cracked up when I read that. I was like, oh my god.
What? Oh, woman, because you would hold up so much better under getting your foot sawed off or blowtorched and having your legs shattered.
Woman up, bro.
Like this, like that line, like I usually agree with that line, but that does not apply here. Wow. Wow.
Maya says, DNF. I just don't think that I'm a Stephen King gal. The way he described CPR as her raping breath into him, sometimes you can just tell a book is written by a man. I've tried to read 3 of his books now, and I just can't do it.
You know, fair enough.
Okay, Hal says, torture porn. And Ellen says, this is my last one. This doesn't even deserve 1 star. That was quite possibly the worst book I have ever read. Boring and never ending. Just a loser filling pages of shit just so he had a big book to show for it. So savage.
Oh my god!
I was like, oh,
that is really. That one's really mean.
That one's really mean.
Oh my god! Wow!
Hilarious. Love it. How weird. Okay, final thoughts and ratings. What was your final thoughts and ratings?
Do you want to go first?
I'll go. Oh, sure. I will go first. So, guys, right now we're going to give our ratings. I'm going to give my personal rating. Tiffany is going to give her personal rating. And then we will do a compiled group rating. And that will be our final rating. So, I love this book. You know, I read this first when I was 17 and I just revisited it. And it was awesome. Part of what makes this book terrifying is that every single bit of it could actually happen. It's a realistic kind of horror, which I love. I love being transported places. The idea of even a fraction of what happens to Paul Sheldon, that someone in reality could do that to you, is what makes this book so scary. Because it could happen. Every bit of it could happen. You imagine yourself in that position constantly as this book unfolds, and the writing is so cerebral, being inside Paul's mind, that it transports you into that stressful situation. Brilliant, scary, a true survival story. 5 stars for me. Tiffany, your turn.
Okay, well, despite trying not to, I did have high expectations for my first Stephen King read, especially considering how popular this one is. I admit I was a little underwhelmed. like when I read the last page of the book, I felt kind of vaguely disappointed. I was like, oh, that's it. I feel like I did really like it. I just wasn't completely blown away. And there was so many things that I did love about it, like the way that his writing put you in the atmosphere of everything. And I did want a little bit more character development with Paul and Annie, though I feel like us talking about it definitely gave me a little bit more. You helped me see Paul better because I felt like he was missing a bit for me on my end, but it's a brilliant concept, and I wish that some of my unanswered questions about Annie had been a little bit more fleshed out, because I really want to know more of her backstory and psyche and stuff like that. So I was a little frustrated about that, but having said all that, it was really entertaining, and I finished it super quickly. I had it done in like a couple of days, so it was a 3.5 for me, and I plan on rounding up to 4 on Goodreads.
So we should go to 4.
It wasn't a 5. I will say it wasn't a 5-star read for, and maybe that's why like I'm like trying to justify my reasons for why it just wasn't a 5-star read for me. Group rating 4 stars or 4.5.
4-star.
But we can't do 4.5 on Goodreads. That's annoying. I really wish Goodreads let you do halves.
You should write them a strongly worded letter.
I will. Not really.
Well, I still think it would be better to do a 10-point system.
You freak. So, Lita, what is our next book?
Our next book is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. That is our November selection. And it's a nice, cozy fantasy, something a little light after Misery, something very fall appropriate. Just a fun, cutesy fantasy about an orc in a coffee shop.
It's so cute looking. I'm really I've heard all it's all the rage on the book talk and the bookstore. And everybody seemed really excited about it when we mentioned that was our book. So this will be a fun one, and like you said, a nice break from the heavy stuff, and a nice cozy into fall kind of vibe.
A nice coffee book.
Oh. Get your pumpkin spice latte and cozy up. My copy, I ordered the special edition copy, and it's going to be here on Tuesday, so I'm really excited to...
Geez, about time.
I know. Well, it wasn't out yet, so I had to wait for the release. So.
Oh, yeah. I just got the regular paperback edition, but that's okay. I love a special edition.
I was going to get the regular, and then as I was scrolling through Amazon, I saw the special editions, and they were just about out, and I was like, I want it though.
Well, hopefully you enjoy it.
I know. I was like, this is kind of a gamble to buy the special editions for a book I have yet to read. But either
we'll find out on November 30th. So come back and see us.
Worst case scenario, I have a beautiful book to leave on my shelf.
Right? Just for decor purposes.
Exactly. It's very cute. Also, if you saw last month, we had a special Bookmate Besties episode, and we did ACOTAR with my sister, and we are having her back, and we're going to discuss A Court of Mist and Fury. So that will also be coming out sometime in November. So keep your eyes out for that if you are interested in continuing the ACOTAR journey with our Bookmate Besties episodes.
Oh, yeah. And it's a good time. We're fun.
It's a good time. And if you listen to the last one, Denise is a hoot. And she holds nothing
Denise
back.
Is our guest bookmate, and she is coming back to do the rest of the series with us. So tune in if you want to hear us talk about A Court of Thorns and Roses. That is available now.
It is.
It is available now. It's available.
It's available. Go listen.
All right, Tiffany, where can everybody find us?
Well, everyone can find us on our website at bookmatespodcast.com. And we're on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. We have all visual episodes on our YouTube channel and with fun extras and things. You can also email us at bookmatespcast@gmail.com if you have hot takes about any of our books that we've read, if you have opinions, or for our future read, if you want a plug on the podcast and you want to talk to us about how you felt about Legends and Lattes, you can email us over there or DM us on Instagram. It's the best way to get a hold of us if you want the world to know your opinion on Legends and Lattes. We'd love to hear it.
Yes, we would. This gets weird sometimes. Whoppa.
Yeehaw!
All right, guys. Happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween. Everyone be
thanks
safe.
for stopping by
to our spooky book talk.
Spooky. All right. Good night, guys. Happy Halloween.
Good night. Everyone be safe. Rawr.